Deep in the Cygnus arm of the galaxy, the research vessel Horizon drifted silently through the void. Its mission: to study the strange predatory behaviors of the indigenous creatures on Vega 9, a planet that had resisted multiple colonization attempts by 3 different species before humans arrived. Captain Marcus Reed stood at the observation deck, his weathered face illuminated by the pale blue glow of the planet below. 20 years in the Galactic Survey Corps had taught him that space held countless dangers, but also wonders beyond imagination. This mission might finally explain why the fearsome predators of Vega 9 had mysteriously avoided human settlements while decimating the camps of other species. "Captain, we've compiled the behavioral data from the last 3 cycles," said Lisa Torres, the ship's lead xenobiologist. "The pattern is undeniable, but honestly, I'm having trouble believing it." Reed turned from the viewport. "Show me." On the holographic display, footage from various settlement attempts played side by side. The Arcturians' compound being overrun by the massive 6-legged predators locals called Razorbacks. The Praxian scientific outpost being systematically dismantled by pack-hunting aerial creatures. Then, the human settlement, identical in layout, equally vulnerable, completely untouched, while Razorbacks prowled the perimeter but never crossed an invisible line. "The indigenous apex predators avoid humans," Reed stated flatly. "The question is why." Dr. Ben Morgan, the team's geneticist, joined them. "Sir, I've been analyzing the biological data. These creatures have sensory organs we've never encountered before, specialized neural clusters that detect something we can't measure with our instruments." "Like what?" Reed asked. "Intention, consciousness, will." Morgan's voice dropped. "They can sense when they're being watched. And for some reason, the human gaze affects them differently." As if to demonstrate, the footage showed a Razorback suddenly freezing, raising its armored head and looking directly at a human observer 200 meters away. The creature's pupils dilated, its posture changed, not threatened but wary. Before, it slowly backed away. "Every predator on Earth evolved with humans as both hunter and prey," Torres added. "We stared down lions, wolves, bears. Our eyes evolved to show our intentions clearly. White's visible, direct gaze. We're the only species in known space with eyes like this." Reed considered this. "So what? Our stare scares them?" "No, sir. It's more complex." Morgan brought up a neural scan. "When other species observe these creatures, there's no special reaction. But when humans watch them, their brains light up in patterns consistent with recognition of an apex predator. Not fear, respect. That night Reed couldn't sleep. The implications were staggering. Humanity, barely a century into galactic society, dismissed as fragile by the older species, carried something ancient and powerful in their gaze, something that transcended planets and evolution. His comm unit beeped. "Captain, you need to see this," Torres said urgently. "The settlement just reported movement at the perimeter. A lot of movement." Reed hurried to the bridge. On the monitors, hundreds of Razorbacks had gathered at the edge of the human colony. Not attacking, just waiting. "What are they doing?" Reed whispered. The colony's security chief, Alex Vega, appeared on screen. "Captain, we've got a situation. The translator team made contact with a Razorback pack leader. They're not here to attack. They're seeking protection. Something's coming. Something that hunts them." In the distance, beyond the gathered Razorbacks, the tree line began to move. Something massive was approaching, something that even the deadliest predators on Vega 9 feared. And now they were all looking to humans for protection. Dawn broke over Vega 9's horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing where hundreds of Razorbacks had gathered. The colony's defensive perimeter, designed to keep predators out, now served a different purpose, keeping something else at. Bay Captain Reed had made planetfall with a tactical team as soon as the situation escalated. Now he stood beside Alex Vega at the edge of the settlement, watching the tree line through high-powered binoculars. "The translator team is calling them shadow movers," Vega explained. "According to what they've pieced together from the Razorbacks, Communication, these things hunt by psychological warfare. They project fear directly into the minds of their prey. And they're coming here? Reed asked. The Razorbacks believe we're immune. Vega handed Reed a data pad. Their sensory organs detect that humans process fear differently. Where other species panic, we analyze, face it, sometimes even seek it out. Dr. Morgan approached, his expression grave. Captain, I've reviewed the biological samples from the edge of the forest. Whatever these shadow movers are, they're not indigenous to Vega 9. They're invasive, like a biological weapon. Reed's blood ran cold. Someone deliberately introduced a predator that hunts by fear? It would explain why 3 different colonization attempts failed, Torres said, joining them. The previous species weren't driven out by the Razorbacks. They were fleeing something worse. A low rumble emanated from the gathered Razorbacks, a collective warning sound. At the forest's edge, the vegetation parted, revealing a creature unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history. It moved like liquid shadow, its form shifting between solid and vapor. 6 limbs supported a body that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But most disturbing was its head, featureless except for a cluster of sensory pits that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. It's scanning, Morgan whispered. Detecting fear responses. The shadow mover paused, seemingly confused by the human settlement. Then it focused on the Razorbacks gathered near the humans. The predators began to tremble, several backing away despite their natural aggression. It's attacking them psychically, Torres said. But it can't seem to get a read on us. Reed watched as the shadow mover extended what appeared to be sensory tendrils toward the perimeter. The moment they crossed the invisible line where human attention was focused, the tendrils recoiled violently. Our gaze is harmful to it, Reed realized. Something about human consciousness, our way of perceiving, disrupts its hunting mechanism. The shadow mover retreated several meters, reassessing. Then it did something unexpected. It began to change form, stretching and reshaping itself into something approximating a human silhouette. It's adapting, Vega said urgently. Learning. Reed made a decision. Full perimeter. Maximum visibility. I want every human eye on those things. Floodlights, cameras, everything. If our gaze affects them, let's weaponize it. As the colony's lights blazed to life, illuminating the edge of the forest, the shadow mover's mimicry faltered. Its form destabilized, rippling like disturbed water. For the first time in recorded history, the apex predator of Vega 9 found itself becoming prey to something it couldn't understand, human attention. But as night fell completely, more shadow movers emerged from the forest. Dozens, then hundreds of the creatures gathered just beyond the light's reach, their forms shifting and pulsing in a hypnotic rhythm. They're communicating, Torres whispered. Coordinating. Reed watched as the shadow movers began to spread out, encircling the entire colony. They're learning that individually they're vulnerable to our gaze. But what about collectively? The largest shadow mover stepped forward, its form stabilizing into something more substantial. It raised what might have been a head and looked directly at the humans watching it. And for the first time, Reed felt the unmistakable sensation of being hunted. They're testing the boundaries, Reed said, tracking the shadow mover's movements around the perimeter. 3 days had passed since first contact, and the standoff continued. Shadow movers probing, humans watching, Razorbacks huddled in between, like reluctant allies. The colony had been transformed into a fortress of attention. Every structure now featured observation posts, cameras linked to display screens, and reflective surfaces positioned to maximize human visibility. The strategy was working, but at a cost. Exhaustion was setting in among the colonists. We can't maintain this level of vigilance indefinitely, Vega admitted. People need to sleep. Dr. Morgan approached with new data. Captain, we've been analyzing the shadow movers' response to different types of observation. There's something unique about direct human attention that affects them more than mechanical surveillance. Explain, Reed prompted. When we watch them, Through cameras, they detect the observation but aren't as strongly repelled. When a human looks directly at them, especially with focused intent, they recoil immediately. Morgan displayed a series of measurements. There's something about consciousness, specifically human consciousness, that generates a field they can detect and find repulsive. Lisa Torres had been working with the colony's engineering team. "We've developed something that might help," she said, unveiling a helmet-like device. "We're calling it an intention amplifier. It focuses and projects human attention like a spotlight." Reed examined the device. "You're saying we can weaponize our gaze?" "Theoretically," Torres replied. "The prototype needs testing." Their discussion was interrupted by an alert. One of the shadow movers had breached the perimeter where a section had been left with only camera surveillance. It moved with frightening speed toward the nearest building, the colony's medical facility. Reed sprinted toward the breach, the prototype amplifier in hand. Inside the medical bay, he found the shadow mover looming over a sedated patient, its form shifting between solid and vapor as it prepared to feed on the unconscious colonist's fear. Without hesitation, Reed activated the amplifier and focused, his entire attention on the creature. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The shadow mover convulsed, its form destabilizing as it emitted a high-pitched shriek that seemed to exist more in the mind than in physical sound waves. The creature retreated, smashing through a window to escape the intensity of Reed's focused gaze. Outside, the other shadow movers reacted to their companions' distress, pulling back from the perimeter. "It works," Reed reported over the comm. "Mass-produce the amplifiers, and get me a direct line to Galactic Command. They need to know what we're dealing with." Hours later, in the colony's command center, Reed faced the stern expression of Admiral Thorne on the holographic display. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Captain," the Admiral said. "You're suggesting these creatures were specifically engineered to target sentient species that respond to fear in predictable ways? And somehow human psychology makes us resistant?" "The evidence suggests they're bioweapons, Admiral," Reed confirmed. "Possibly left over from an ancient conflict. Human neurological responses are unlike any other known species. We can feel fear yet still function analytically. And the Razorbacks? They've evolved a limited defense. They can sense intention and avoid predators that focus on them. But against shadow movers, that's not enough." Admiral Thorne considered this. "If what you're saying is true, this changes everything about our understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. We're not just newcomers. We might be the only species naturally equipped to fight these things." As night fell again, Reed tested the new amplifiers with a volunteer team. 20 humans, their gazes focused and amplified, created a wall of attention that the shadow movers could not penetrate. For the first time, the humans pushed forward beyond the perimeter, driving the shadow movers back toward the forest. The Razorbacks watched this display with what could only be described as awe. But in the darkness between the trees, Reed spotted something new. A shadow mover twice the size of the others, its form more stable, more defined. It observed the humans without retreating, studying their defense. And somehow Reed knew it was learning. The massive shadow mover revealed itself fully on the 7th day. Unlike its smaller kin, it moved with deliberate precision, its form solid and defined, evidence of greater control, higher intelligence. The colony's xenobiologists named it the Alpha. "It's been watching us," Torres observed, "learning our patterns, our technologies." Reed nodded grimly. "And now it's ready to counter them." The Alpha approached the perimeter alone, stopping just beyond the range of the attention amplifiers. Then it did something unprecedented. It produced a sound, a sequence of clicks and whistles that made the air vibrate strangely. "It's attempting communication," Dr. Morgan said, adjusting the translator algorithms. The translation came through broken and incomplete. "Humans. Different. Why resist? All prey. Eventually." Reed stepped forward, amplifier activated, and focused his gaze directly on the Alpha. "We are not prey," he stated firmly. The Alpha's form rippled but held. "All see prey. Fear. Sustenance. You. Delay. Inevitable." "We don't fear you," Reed replied. "We study you." This concept seemed to disturb the Alpha. Its form flickered momentarily. Impossible. All fear. Darkness. We mastered darkness, Reed said. We created light. As if to demonstrate, the colony's floodlights intensified, bathing the Alpha in artificial daylight. It retreated several steps, its body mass contracting defensively. "Captain," Torres whispered urgently. "The translator is picking up frequencies. We can't hear. It's communicating with the others." Reed barely had time to process this warning before the attack began. Dozens of shadow movers surged forward simultaneously from multiple directions, no longer repelled by human observation. They had adapted, developed a resistance to the very thing that had previously kept them at bay. "They're evolving," Morgan shouted, "learning to ignore our attention." The perimeter defenses activated, amplifiers, lights, and sound barriers. But the shadow movers pushed through, their forms shifting more rapidly now, becoming harder to track with the naked eye. Reed ordered an emergency evacuation to the colony center. As colonists retreated to the reinforced buildings, the Razorbacks surprisingly moved with them, forming a protective ring around the humans. Inside the command center, Reed assessed their options. "They've neutralized our advantage. We need something new." Dr. Morgan had been analyzing the recent sensor data. "Captain, I've detected a pattern. When we first arrived, our observation affected them strongly. Then they adapted. But there's a difference between passive observation and active study." "Explain," Reed demanded. "When we merely watch them, they've learned to resist. But when we truly focus, with curiosity, with the intent to understand, they still react." Morgan pulled up neural scans. "It's not just our gaze, it's our cognitive approach. The scientific method itself is anathema to them." Torres caught on immediately. "They feed on fear, an emotional response. But systematic analysis is something they can't process," Reed finished. "Fear is instinctive, but science requires training. It's uniquely human in its current form." Reed devised a desperate plan. Every colonist with scientific training would focus their attention on the shadow movers, not to repel them, but to understand them, to classify, categorize, and analyze their behavior with methodical precision. As night fell completely, the shadow movers pressed their advantage, breaching the outer buildings. But they met an unexpected resistance, humans equipped with scanners and recording devices, documenting every aspect of the shadow movers' biology with clinical detachment. The effect was subtle at first, then increasingly apparent. The shadow movers' movements became erratic, their forms less stable. The Alpha retreated to the forest edge, visibly disturbed by this new form of attention. "It's working," Vega reported. "They can't process being the subjects of study rather than the hunters." By midnight, the shadow movers had withdrawn completely, leaving only the Alpha at the edge of the forest. It fixed its sensory organs on Reed one final time. The translator conveyed its message. "Humans, dangerous, not prey, predator of different kind. We will adapt." Reed stepped forward, meeting its gaze without amplification. "So will we." The Alpha retreated into the darkness, but Reed knew this wasn't victory, merely the end of the first battle in a war unlike any humanity had ever faced. The uneasy peace lasted 3 weeks. The shadow movers retreated deep into the forests of Vega 9, while the human colony fortified its position. The Razorbacks remained, forming an unusual symbiotic relationship with the humans, serving as early warning systems in exchange for protection. Reed used this time to prepare. Galactic Command had sent reinforcements, 2 science vessels and a military cruiser. The Horizon had been converted into a floating laboratory dedicated to understanding the shadow movers. "They're unlike anything in the xenobiological record," Dr. Morgan explained during a briefing. "Their ability to manipulate fear responses suggests they evolved, or were designed, specifically to prey on sentient species." Admiral Thorne, who had arrived with the reinforcements, raised a critical question. "If these creatures are bioweapons, who created them? And why haven't we encountered them before?" Reed had been considering this. The oldest records from the Arcturians mention dream eaters that hunted their ancestors. The Praxians have legends of shadow walkers. What if these creatures have been influencing galactic development for millennia, keeping certain species confined to their home systems? And humans somehow slipped through? Torres asked. Our visual, cortex and pattern recognition abilities evolved differently, Morgan suggested. We're hardwired to see faces in random patterns to anticipate threats before they materialize. Our paranoia became our shield. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent alert. Sensors had detected massive movement in the forest. The shadow movers were on the move, but not toward the colony. They were gathering at an ancient structure that orbital scans had just discovered beneath the dense canopy. It appears to be a ship, Torres reported, displaying the scans. Or what's left of one. Carbon dating suggests it crash-landed here, over 50,000 years ago. Reed immediately organized an expedition. With a team of scientists and security personnel, they approached the ancient crash site cautiously. The shadow movers seemed to be performing some kind of ritual around the derelict vessel, their forms synchronized in undulating patterns. They're drawing energy from it, Morgan whispered, checking his instruments. The ship is emitting radiation on frequencies we've never recorded before. As they watched from a concealed position, the Alpha appeared larger than before. It approached the ship and seemed to merge partially with its hull. Information or energy, possibly both, transferred between them. It's activating something, Torres warned. The ground trembled as ancient machinery awakened. A section of the ship rose from the forest floor, revealing a chamber that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The Alpha entered, followed by dozens of the largest shadow movers. We need to see what's in there, Reed decided, despite the obvious danger. Using their scientific focus as a shield, the team crept closer to the exposed chamber. Inside, they discovered the truth. The shadow movers weren't just predators, they were seeds. The Alpha was connecting with what appeared to be a massive consciousness core, downloading information collected from every world where shadow movers had fed. It's a reconnaissance system, Reed realized. They consume fear to understand species' weaknesses, then report back to whoever built this. The Alpha detected their presence. Instead of attacking, it communicated directly. Humans, unexpected, variable. Creators will adjust parameters. Who are your creators? Reed demanded. The response came not in words but in images projected directly into their minds. A species ancient beyond comprehension, methodically cataloging and conquering the galaxy one fear at a time. They're coming, Morgan translated, his face pale. The shadow movers are just the advanced scouts. As they retreated from the awakening ship, the team witnessed the shadow movers transforming, evolving into something more complex, more dangerous. The ship was altering them, adapting them specifically to counter human resistance. Back at the colony, Reed delivered the grim news. We're not dealing with a local threat anymore. This is a galactic-level extinction protocol that's been running for millennia, and we just triggered the next phase. That night, the newly transformed shadow movers emerged from the forest. They moved with precision, their forms solid and defined, immune to both human observation and scientific analysis. Their new biology incorporated countermeasures to every defense the colony had developed. As they approached the perimeter, Reed realized with growing dread that humanity's greatest advantage, its unique neurological profile, had just become the blueprint for the perfect predator. The final battle for Vega 9 had begun. Evacuate the non-essential personnel, Reed ordered as the transformed shadow movers approached. Get them to the ships. The colony erupted into controlled chaos as families were hurried toward the landing pads. Reed knew they couldn't save everyone. The shadow movers were moving too quickly, cutting off escape routes with tactical precision that revealed their new intelligence. They're hurting us, Vega observed grimly, using our own strategies against us. Reed nodded. They've incorporated our pattern recognition abilities. They're anticipating our moves. From the forest edge, the Alpha emerged, now nearly 3 times its original size. Its form had solidified into something resembling an armored exoskeleton, with limbs articulated for both speed and power. Most disturbing were its new sensory organs, clusters of what looked like human eyes, modified and multiplied across its head. "It's adapted our visual system," Morgan said in horror. "Weaponized it." The Alpha approached the perimeter alone, stopping just beyond the defensive line. Its voice, now clear and modulated, addressed them directly. "Your resistance data has been valuable. The creators send their gratitude." Reed stepped forward. "Who are these creators? What do they want?" "The architects of order seek stability. Species that succumb to fear create predictable patterns. You do not. You are destabilizing." The Alpha's head tilted, studying Reed, with its multifaceted eyes. "But you can be understood, assimilated." The Razorbacks, sensing the imminent danger, formed protective clusters around the remaining colonists. Their behavior had changed over the weeks. They had begun mimicking human patterns, developing rudimentary formations based on what they'd observed. Dr. Torres noticed something extraordinary. "Captain, look at the Razorbacks. They're not just protecting us. They're watching the shadow movers the way we do. They've learned our gaze." Indeed, the Razorbacks had positioned themselves to maintain constant visual contact with the approaching shadow movers, their natural defenses amplified by this new behavior. Reed had a sudden insight. The Razorbacks evolved alongside the shadow movers. They developed limited protection against them. But they never developed scientific curiosity, the ability to study rather than simply react. "Until now," Morgan finished. "They're learning from us." As the transformed shadow movers launched their attack, breaking through the perimeter defenses with ease, Reed implemented a desperate strategy. Rather than fighting directly, the remaining colonists split into teacher-student pairs with the Razorbacks, demonstrating observational techniques that had initially repelled the shadow movers. The effect was unexpected and dramatic. The Razorbacks, already sensitive to intention, quickly grasped the concept of focused observation. Their natural sensory organs, evolved specifically to detect the shadow movers, amplified the effect of human-style attention. The first shadow mover to encounter this combined defense recoiled violently, its newly adapted form destabilizing under the dual assault of human analytical attention and Razorback sensory focus. "It's working," Torres exclaimed. The shadow movers adapted to counter human observation, but not the combination of human methods with Razorback sensory biology. Reed immediately ordered the strategy implemented colony-wide. Every human Razorback pair focused their combined attention on the attacking shadow movers, creating a defensive web that the creatures couldn't penetrate. The Alpha recognized the danger too late. As it commanded its forces to retreat, the human Razorback teams pressed forward, expanding their perimeter of observation. Several shadow movers caught in the crossfire of multiple attentional beams collapsed entirely, their forms dissolving into inert matter. For the first time, Reed saw uncertainty in the Alpha's movements. It retreated to the ancient ship, the remaining shadow movers following in disarray. Admiral Thorne contacted Reed from orbit. "Captain, we're detecting energy buildup at the crash site. That ship is powering up." Reed made the call. "Target the ship. Full orbital strike." The military cruiser unleashed its arsenal on the ancient vessel, but the shadow movers had created a protective field around it. The weapons barely penetrated. "We need another approach," Reed decided. "Prepare the horizon for atmospheric entry. We're going to deliver a package directly." Hours later, as dawn broke over Vega 9, the research vessel Horizon descended through the clouds, piloted remotely toward the awakening alien ship. In its cargo hold, every attention amplifier they could manufacture, rigged to channel the combined observational patterns of humans and Razorbacks. The shadow movers sensed the threat swarming the descending vessel, but it was too late. The Horizon crashed directly into the ancient ship's exposed core, the impact triggering the amplifiers. A pulse of focused attention, the weaponized gaze of two species united against a common predator, washed over the crash site. The shadow movers caught in the blast simply ceased to exist, their forms unable to maintain cohesion under such intense observation. The Alpha, partially protected by the ship's hull, survived but was severely damaged. As Reed led a team to secure the site, they found it crawling from the wreckage, its elegant form now broken and unstable. This delay only, it managed to communicate. Creators, still coming. Reed stood over the creature, his gaze unwavering. Then we'll be waiting and we won't be alone. Behind him, humans and Razorback stood side by side, a new alliance forged in the face of extinction, an alliance based on the shared power of observation and the unflinching human gaze. 5 years passed. Vega 9 had been transformed from a contested outpost into the headquarters of the Observation Corps, a new branch of the Galactic Defense Force dedicated to combating the Shadow Mover threat. The colony had grown tenfold, with research facilities and training grounds spreading across the once forbidden landscape. Reed, now General Reed, stood on the balcony of the Central Command Tower, watching human and Razorback teams running drills in the morning light. The Razorbacks had proven remarkably adaptable, their cognitive abilities expanding rapidly through sustained interaction with humans. They couldn't speak, but they had developed a complex language of gestures and vocalizations that translators could now interpret with 90% accuracy. "The Centauri sector reports are in," said Admiral Torres, formerly Dr. Torres, as she joined him. 2 more seed ships discovered and neutralized using the combined observation protocol, Reed nodded. "And the Arcturians?" "Their resistance training is progressing," Torres replied. "Their visual cortex doesn't have our advantages, but they're developing technological compensations. Several of their worlds have now been cleared of Shadow Mover influence." The greatest discovery had come 6 months after the Battle of Vega 9. Analysis of the destroyed alien vessel had revealed a galaxy-wide network of similar ships, an ancient system designed to categorize, control, and, when necessary, cull species that developed along undesired lines. The Architects of Order, as the Shadow Movers called their creators, had been seeding these biological weapons throughout the galaxy for millions of years, using fear as both a filtering mechanism and a control system. Species that succumbed to fear remained predictable, manageable. Those that overcame it were eliminated before they could spread. Humanity, with its contradictory relationship to fear, simultaneously feeling it deeply, yet often acting despite it, had slipped through this filter. The human capacity to transform fear into curiosity, to study what frightened them, had created a blind spot in the Architect's perfect system. "The Alpha's remains are showing new activity," Morgan reported, joining them on the balcony. The scientist now headed the Shadow Mover Research Division, studying the captured creature that had once nearly destroyed them. Though severely damaged, the Alpha had not died. Instead, it existed in a contained state, unable to regenerate fully, under the constant observation of specialized teams. More importantly, it served as a source of invaluable intelligence about its creators. "What kind of activity?" Reed asked. "It's attempting to communicate something new," Morgan explained. "The translators are struggling with the concepts, but it appears to be a warning. The Architects have accelerated their timetable. They're coming directly rather than sending more Shadow Movers." Reed had been expecting this. The loss of so many seed ships and the failure of their advanced scouts would eventually trigger a direct response. "How long do we have?" "Based on the signal patterns we've detected, less than a year." The 3 of them stood in silence, contemplating the magnitude of the threat. The Architects were a species so ancient, they had been manipulating galactic evolution before humans had even evolved on Earth. Their technology, their knowledge, their power, all would dwarf anything the combined forces of the known species could muster. Yet Reed felt something unexpected, not fear, but anticipation. "Gather the Alliance representatives," he ordered. "It's time to implement the Lighthouse Protocol." Developed over the past 5 years, the Lighthouse Protocol was humanity's answer to the approaching threat. A galaxy-wide network of observation posts, each equipped with amplifiers that could project human attention across vast distances of space. Combined with the sensory abilities of the Razorbacks and the technologies of a dozen allied species, it created a detection grid that no Shadow Mover could penetrate. As the representatives gathered in the central chamber, humans, razorbacks, Arcturians, Praxians, and half a dozen species that had joined the alliance, Reed presented the final phase of the plan. The architects have never been observed, he explained. They have always been the watchers, never the watched. Their entire system is based on this asymmetry. He activated a holographic display showing the approaching architect vessel, a massive structure that distorted space itself around it. We will not hide. We will not cower. Instead, we will turn the collective gaze of every sentient species toward them. We will observe them with the full power of our combined attention. The Alpha, brought into the chamber under heavy containment, reacted violently to this proposal. Its form fluctuated wildly as it projected a desperate warning. Creators. Cannot be observed. Sacred. Forbidden. Reed approached the containment field, meeting the Alpha's many eyes with his unwavering human gaze. Nothing is beyond observation. Nothing is beyond understanding. That is the core of humanity's strength, and now it is the strength of our alliance. As the representatives departed to implement the Lighthouse Protocol across their territories, Reed returned to the balcony. Night had fallen over Vega 9 and the stars shone brightly above. Somewhere among them the architects were approaching, confident in their ancient strategies, unaware that the rules had changed. The human gaze, curious, fearless, analytical, had created something unprecedented, a galaxy where prey species learned to see their predators, where observation itself became the ultimate weapon. Reed smiled up at the stars. Let them come. Across the vast emptiness of space, even the most ancient and powerful beings would soon feel what it meant to be seen, truly seen, by human eyes. And perhaps, for the first time in their long existence, the architects of order would know fear.